Europe has just made a small browser change with a much bigger political message. From June 4, 2026, the European Parliament is making Qwant, the French privacy-focused search engine, the default search engine on Parliament computers. Searches from the address bar in Microsoft Edge and Mozilla Firefox will go to Qwant instead of Google. Reuters reported the change, and the key detail is important: this is a default setting, not a total ban. Members of the European Parliament and staff can still choose another search engine. Why does this matter? Because Europe is no longer treating search, cloud, email, office software, video calls, AI tools, and data centers as normal software purchases only. These systems are becoming strategic infrastructure. The question is not just, which tool is convenient? The harder question is, who controls the system, who can access the data, and what happens if geopolitics changes? Qwant is central because privacy is its main selling point. In its official privacy policy, Qwant says it preserves privacy without targeted advertising and without storing search history. That is very different from the advertising-driven search model people associate with Google. For Parliament staff, searches can reveal policy research, investigations, political priorities, and sensitive institutional work. A default switch can redirect thousands of daily searches away from Google without forcing every user to change manually. There is also a deeper search infrastructure story. Qwant and Ecosia have been building a European search index through European Search Perspective. Ecosia says this index is called STAN, short for Search Trusted API Access Network, and is designed to support sovereign, privacy-first search infrastructure for Europe. The honest caveat is that Qwant is not yet a perfect Google replacement everywhere. Historically, many alternative search engines have depended on Google or Microsoft Bing behind the scenes. But STAN shows Europe is trying to build the missing infrastructure instead of renting it forever. Now let us clear up the Microsoft part, because this is where headlines can mislead. The European Parliament is not fully dropping Microsoft in this Qwant announcement. In fact, the new search default applies inside Microsoft Edge as well as Firefox. Microsoft Office and other Microsoft services remain deeply embedded across European institutions. So the accurate headline is not, Europe deleted Microsoft. The accurate headline is, Europe is beginning to reduce dependency on US tech, one layer at a time. Microsoft is still part of the wider privacy debate. In March 2024, the European Data Protection Supervisor said the European Commission's use of Microsoft 365 had infringed data protection rules for EU institutions, including issues around personal data transfers outside the EU and the need for proper safeguards. In July 2025, EDPS said the Commission had demonstrated compliance for the Microsoft 365 use examined in that proceeding. That does not end the bigger debate, but it proves the concern was serious enough for formal enforcement. There is also the legal sovereignty problem. A European Parliament written question in 2025 pointed to Microsoft France testimony in the French Senate, where a Microsoft France official admitted that French citizens' data stored in Europe could fall into the hands of the US government. The Commission answered that personal data can only be shared with third-country public authorities under GDPR conditions, and that the EU Data Act requires safeguards against unlawful access or transfer. In simple words, data residency helps, but ownership, legal exposure, and operational control still matter. That is why the Qwant switch landed in the same week as the European Commission's new tech sovereignty package. On June 3, 2026, the Commission announced measures covering semiconductors, cloud, artificial intelligence, and open source. The package includes the CHIPS Act 2.0, the Cloud and AI Development Act, and an EU open source strategy. Brussels is saying that Europe needs more control over the technologies that keep hospitals, public services, energy grids, companies, and governments running. The Cloud and AI Development Act is one of the biggest pieces. The Commission says Europe needs more data center, cloud, and computing capacity, because AI demand is rising fast. It also says over-reliance on non-EU cloud providers is a risk to digital autonomy and resilience. The plan includes tripling EU data center capacity within 5 to 7 years, faster permitting, better access to energy and land, and a single EU-wide framework for cloud and AI sovereignty. Public bodies would assess providers by risk level, not just by price. Open source is the software layer behind that policy. The EU open source strategy says open source can reduce dependence on non-EU technologies, improve interoperability, reduce lock-in, and give public administrations more control. This is why the Qwant story is really about a wider stack: search engines, workplace tools, email, cloud, AI, chips, cybersecurity, and open standards. France is already moving in this direction. In January 2026, the French government announced that Visio, a secure video conferencing tool developed by Dynam, would be rolled out across state services by 2027. The official French statement names Microsoft Teams, Zoom, GoToMeeting, and WebEx as tools that create security, cost, and strategic dependency problems. The stated goal is secure and confidential public communication. Denmark is taking a more cautious, but symbolic path. In June 2025, Denmark's Ministry of Digital Affairs announced a pilot project testing Collabora, based on LibreOffice, as an open-source alternative to Microsoft Office inside its case management workflow. This is not a dramatic overnight replacement. It is how serious migration starts, with templates, compatibility tests, track changes, tables, and real document workflows. Germany's Schleswig-Holstein is further along. In December 2025, the state government said LibreOffice had become the binding standard for Office applications, and that almost 80% of workstations in the state administration were already using it instead of Microsoft Office. The state also pointed to nearly 44,000 mailboxes moved to OpenChange, and said the switch had already saved more than €15 million in license costs. So what does this mean? First, defaults matter. Most people do not change browser settings, so the default can move behavior at scale. Second, privacy is no longer only a consumer rights topic. It is becoming a security, economic, and sovereignty topic. Third, Europe is not trying to unplug from every US company tomorrow. It is trying to avoid a future where one foreign vendor, one foreign law, or one foreign political decision can disrupt critical public services. The risks are real. European alternatives must be good enough to use. If Qwant gives weak results, users will switch back to Google. If open-source Office tools break formatting, staff will resist. If European cloud capacity is too small or too expensive, institutions will stay with the hyperscalers. Sovereignty has to work on Monday morning, when someone opens a document, joins a meeting, searches for evidence, or runs an AI workload. The next things to watch are clear. Will Qwant and Ecosia expand STAN and improve search quality across more European languages? Will the Cloud and AI Development Act survive negotiations? Will more governments copy France, Denmark, and Schleswig-Holstein? And will US tech companies respond with stronger European controls, or simply new marketing around sovereign cloud? The bottom line is this: the European Parliament's switch from Google to Qwant is small technically, but big as a signal. Europe is starting to ask a hard question about every digital tool it uses. If we do not control the software, the data, the cloud, or the legal exposure, can we really call it public infrastructure?